All right, we are live. Hello. Welcome back. I am Gina from Advantage College Planning, and tonight I'm really excited because I am joined by my colleague Jordan. And so we are going to be talking about college lingo, all of those crazy words that get thrown around in higher ed when you are getting ready to either start the college application process or even earlier when you're doing your college search. You might go on campus tours and hear the admissions officers or even the student who's providing the tour giving this wonderful tour of their campus, but throwing out words that you don't know what they mean. And then you might be left trying to figure out what that word means, and that throws you off instead of being able to focus on what the tour guide is saying. And sometimes we found that the college application process and the college search process can feel really stressful and daunting for students and families. A big part of what we do at Advantage College Planning is work to reduce that stress and make you feel more comfortable and confident in being able to navigate that process smoothly. And like anything else, a big part of feeling confident is understanding the language and understanding all of the information that's coming at you. So what we wanted to do tonight was empower you with that knowledge about a lot of different words that get thrown around in higher ed, so that when you're on those campus tours or when you're completing your applications and you come across these terms, you can feel really confident because you know what they mean. So we're really excited to be here tonight. I see lots of people are coming in. Awesome. So as you are joining us, I'd love for you to put in the chat where you are tuning in from and also what year your students are. It's always really helpful for us to know a little bit about our audience and kind of where everybody is in the process. Irene is feeling stressed. Great, Irene. I'm sorry that you're feeling stressed, but you are in the right place. Awesome. So this will be a really great time for you to learn a little bit more. But yeah, we'd love to know where your students are coming in from. Like I said, some of this language is going to be really common. You're going to find it once you get to senior year and you're working on those applications. But for younger students, it's also really helpful for you to know as you get ready to start doing those campus tours. So just let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know what year your students are. Let us know the sound is working, all those fun things. It's always just helpful to have that feedback. As we are going through our discussion tonight, Jordan and I will also be answering questions. So sometimes we'll be able to answer your questions right in the flow of the conversation, but we'll also have some time at the end to answer questions as well. So if anything pops up, go ahead and just put those in the chat and we will get to them. For those of you who have joined us before, welcome back. And you might notice that my background is a little bit different. So I am streaming in live from Madison, New Jersey. I came up to visit some friends and due to some weather-related challenges, got to spend an extra night, which was awesome. So if you're not familiar with the Madison, New Jersey area, it is just right outside of Newark. I flew in and out of Newark. It's maybe 15, 20 minutes from here without traffic, very close. But Madison is home to two really great smaller universities, Fairleigh Dickinson and Drew University. So if you're interested in looking at schools up north and in the New Jersey area, and you want a school that's close to New York City, easy access for those internships, but not right in the middle of a city, going to one of those schools in a place like Madison could be a really good fit. So definitely check them out. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Yay! Irene told me my sound is working. Thanks, Irene. You're awesome. Super appreciate that. Great. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to introduce you all to my colleague, Jordan. So I have the pleasure of working with Jordan on the Advantage College Planning team. She's one of our college planning consultants, and she also does a lot of great work with student athletes, which we'll be doing another Facebook Live about soon. But if you have any questions about student athletes, the way that we work with them, you can definitely reach out to us through our website, advcp.com, and we'll get you connected with Jordan and my other colleague, Ariel. But we're super excited she's here tonight. And so Jordan has been around for a while. She worked with me in admissions when we were at Meredith. And so she's very familiar with all this lingo, and now she gets to help students as well. So yay, I'm excited you're here, Jordan. It's going to be great.
It's great.
Yay. So when Jordan and I the reason we, again, hopped on here to do this is we just were talking about our students and just a lot of common themes coming up with people not really knowing what certain words were. And so we've decided to break down the lingo that we hear the most into two different categories. Words that you tend to come across when you're in your college search, and then words that you tend to come across or terms when you're actually doing the application process. So we wanted to start with the college search. So for those of you that have, I know we've got some people with sophomores here. We've got some people all the way up through seniors. Great. So for those sophomores and juniors, this will be really most relevant to you. So let's just start talking about some of this crazy language, Jordan. So when we're thinking about college search, what are some of the most common terms that your students have been asking about? What have you been finding is most common?
Yeah, so one term that's actually a little bit new for me is impacted program or impacted major. I typically have heard of this as like a limited enrollment major or a limited seat major, but now I'm hearing impacted major or impacted program. So basically, that is a major within a college that has a limited number of spots for students. So sometimes there's a two-part admission process into that program. There are a variety of different ways students can get into one of those impacted majors, but basically it's a limited major within a larger college community.
Got it. So if a student is doing a campus tour and they hear, oh, our business program or our engineering program or our nursing program, those are some of the more common ones we hear. Computer science, we're hearing some of those. You hear it's an impacted major, then the student should do what? They should understand, okay, it might be a little harder to get into this program, or what should the student take away from that, do you think?
Yeah, so I think it depends. Sometimes it can definitely be harder to get into that program. Sometimes there are going to be specific requirements for that program. So, like an engineering program, they're going to want to see more of those math and science classes, students taking advantage of those opportunities in high school. Um, and yeah, sometimes that means it is harder to get into. But I think asking questions when you're on those campus tours about how impacted majors are different in terms of admissions than general admission is a really helpful way to get that information.
Awesome. Yeah. So definitely be listening out for that. When you're on the tours and, maybe the tour guide or maybe you're on the college website, a lot of times, if you're looking at the impacted majors, right, or any majors, the college might be giving you information talking about GPA, is it weighted or unweighted, class rank. And so those are terms that get thrown around a lot. And some students know what they mean. Some students just have heard them their whole lives and don't really know exactly how that information gets pulled together. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that basic. When you're looking at a student's transcript, the transcript might show what is called a weighted GPA or a W GPA, and then an unweighted GPA, a U GPA. Some schools don't differentiate. They only put one GPA. And sometimes it's weighted and sometimes it's unweighted. And some schools will put both. Like we are in our main office area is in the greater Raleigh, North Carolina area, the Research Triangle area. And most of the public school systems in Wake County will list both a weighted and an unweighted GPA. So the easy way to understand these different terms is an unweighted GPA is that GPA that we all might be a little more familiar with, which is on a 4-point scale. An A is 4 points, a B is 3 points, a C is 2 points, a D is 1 point, and an F is 0 points, right? So you can add up the total number of points that you earn throughout the semester. Let's say you take 8 classes, you get your total number of points. Let's say you get all A's, and then you get 32 points, right? Because you took 8 classes, you divide those 32 points by your 8 classes, and that's how you have a 4.0 GPA. You have all A's. Great. However, there are some schools where students are given an opportunity to take some more challenge in their classes. So there's the academic level or regular or standard level class. Then you might be able to take an honors level class, or you might be able to take an advanced placement or a dual enrollment class. We have these different options. And with each level, the expectation of the student, the level of rigor of the curriculum is going to get a little bit harder and a little bit higher. So if the school is using a weighted GPA, then we see if a student is taking, let's say, an honors class, for example, instead of getting a 4 for an A, they get an extra half a point. So they'd get 4.5. So if a student was taking 8 honors classes that they were getting all A's in, they would have a 4.0 unweighted, but they'd have a 4.5 weighted GPA, right? If the student is taking a dual enrollment class, some dual enrollment classes, not all of them, or an advanced placement class, AP classes, students can get a whole point bump for their weighted. So an A would be 5 points instead of 4 on the weighted scale. So that's how students have these two different GPAs. They might say, well, I have, a 3.5 unweighted, but I have a 3.9 weighted. And that's because they're getting more points for how challenging and difficult their classes are that they're taking. So then the class rank is pulled from that data. So the class rank is going to look at the student who took the hardest classes and got the highest grades. They're at the front of the line of that entire graduating class, the class of 2024. If you line them all up in your high school, the student who has the hardest classes with the highest grades, they're the valedictorian, right? Some people might be familiar with that term. They're number 1 in the class rank. And then everybody kind of lines up after that student. So your student might have a class rank that's a number. So there's 500 students in the class and your student is number 250, right? So they'd be in the top 50% of their class, or maybe they would know that they're 250 out of 500. So the class rank is really just a way for a student to see, and for the college to see, okay, based on the opportunities that were available to the student at the school and the other students that are in their peer group, essentially within that high school, this is how the student falls in terms of how they're performing and the opportunities academically that they've been taking advantage of. So GPA, class rank, those are two that I explain a lot.
Yes. And when I work with students, I like to look at their or I like for students to bring their full transcript when we meet for the first time, because a lot of the times, if you're in Power School or something like that, you can only see that weighted GPA pretty easily. And so it's really nice for Wake County public school students to have all of that weighted, unweighted, and class rank information all in one spot. Super helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. So that in Wake County schools, it shows all of that on the bottom of the student transcript. So that's a great place to start, is if you want, especially if your student is getting ready to apply to college, if you're a junior, starting to think about the process, get a copy of their high school transcript. It's really important so that you can see exactly what information is going to be sent to the colleges and start to get familiar with all of this data. That's a really good point. Good suggestion. This time of year, I'm hearing a lot about demonstrated interest. Are you getting questions about that? Yeah.
Definitely. And having worked in admissions, this is the time of year when admissions counselors are starting to go visit high schools. They're hosting open houses for students. And so demonstrated interest was also coming up on that side of the desk too this time of year.
Yep. Yeah. So how can a student show it? What are their options? And why would we want to do that?
Right. So demonstrated interest is basically a student showing a college that they are interested in them by gathering information and learning more. So that can be something like doing research on a website. It could be attending a virtual visit, doing one of those campus tours, virtual campus tours. It could be going for an actual in-person campus tour. An open house. I know fall is a great time of year for our seniors to go to college open houses, and spring is a great time for juniors to do those open houses. Informational interviews. There are a bunch of different ways that you can show that you're interested in a college. And colleges like to see that students are interested because, of course, that is helpful for them as they're gathering information about the student and making an admission decision. And for students, it's helpful because you are figuring out, okay, yes, this is a college I want to apply to. Or, okay, now that I've been on campus, I have a feel for the surrounding area. Maybe it's not the right fit for me. So I think it's a process where the college is getting information about the student is getting information about the college, and it's just another way to try to figure out if it's a good fit.
Yeah, that's always what it comes back to. Is it a good fit for the college? Is it a good fit for the student? Yeah, and there are some schools where, the level of interest that the student is taking initiative and showing can be a factor that is considered in the admissions decision that school is making, because they want to be admitting students who are taking initiative and are familiar with their university and have a higher chance of potentially choosing to attend their university if admitted. So that can definitely be a factor. Another factor that sometimes some schools can consider in admissions is legacy. And if a student is a legacy, we're hearing a little bit about that. So what does that mean if a student is a legacy?
Typically, if a student is a legacy, that means that either their parents or sometimes their grandparents attended that same university.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, on a college application, a student will be asked if they've had a relative attend that institution. Sometimes they're just asking about parents or grandparents. Sometimes they're asking about aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters. So that legacy definition changes from school to school. But typically, it's if your parents or sometimes your grandparents have attended the institution that you're applying to.
Yep. Great. So that covers a lot of the terms, not all of them, but like a lot of the more common terms that you're probably going to see
Yep.
when you're doing your college search. I know we've got some seniors here on the call, or parents of seniors. So we also want to talk about when you're sitting down to actually do your college application, what terms are going to come up. And we had a couple of questions in the chat. So Brian was asking if we need a copy of the high school transcript to fill out the college applications. Brian, yes. So I would recommend asking for a copy of the high school transcript. Make sure your student's in contact with their school counselor, because every school district is a little bit different about when they're going to do the final run for class rank calculation. Here, I'm in New Jersey, but in where I normally am in North Carolina, usually it's right around the end of September. A lot of students have been telling me, their counselors have been telling them end of September is when they're going to do the final run. That's when class rank gets officially calculated for the senior class. That's the data that the school counselors will be using when they're sending out their data to colleges. So it's usually in the student's best interest to wait for that, just so you have everything exactly the way that it's going to look on the information sent to colleges. But you want to have the transcript when you're doing your applications for two reasons. Number one, there are some colleges, like Tiffany responded, which was super helpful, Tiffany, that some colleges will ask you to transcribe the entire transcript into a specific section of the Common App. There's some schools that require you to fill out a section called courses and grades. And so if a school requires that, you need to have the transcript so you can do that correctly. So for every school in the Common Application, within the education section, there is a section called grades in the education portion of the Common App, where a student needs to put their graduating class size, their class rank, and then their GPA. So you really most times need to have a transcript to get that, or you might be able to ask your school counselor and they might be able to provide that to you. But if it's on the transcript, you can use it for that. The third reason that you should have that transcript goes into one of our terms that we wanted to tell you about, which is the SSAR, also known as the SRAR, depending on which college you're applying to. So Jordan, do you want to explain this SSAR, SRAR process?
Yes, I've even heard it called the SRAR.
Oh,
But
I've never heard the
yeah,
SRAR. Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I prefer SRAR, but
Yeah.
that's just my personal preference.
SRAR. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
SRAR. So the SRAR is the self-reported academic record. I'll be honest, I don't know what SSAR stands for. I assume some other kind of combination of those words.
Yeah. So it's self-reported academic record, and then it's the
Mm-hmm.
student. I'll look it up while you're talking.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
the Florida
So
schools that use the SSAR.
right. So the SRAR, the SRAR, is basically where a student is going to transcribe their entire transcript into this form. So they will provide information about their, did you find the name, Gina?
So it's the self-reported, but they hyphenate the self-reported. So that's just the first S.
Uh-huh.
And then the second S is student
Got it.
academic record. And
Academic
there's a
record.
slight
Okay.
variation. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So a student will put their kind of, oh, I'm blanking on the word. Their grading scale. They will put their grading scale into the SRAR. They will put every class they've taken in high school, and they will put every grade that they've received in high school into the SRAR. Some popular schools that require that we see coming up in this area: Tennessee requires the SRAR. Clemson requires the SRAR. And so it's definitely something that you need to do carefully, complete carefully. It's a lot of data you're inputting and a lot of specific information. And you want to make sure you give yourself enough time to fill that out. But yeah, the SRA is basically a student transcribing their whole transcript into a form that the college can then use to recalculate their own institution specific GPA according to a formula that they've decided makes the most sense for them in their process.
Yep. Yep. Perfect. So SSAR, SRAR. Another one I'm explaining a lot is FERPA.
Mm-hmm.
So FERPA is FERPA. So it's the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act. We're just going to talk about a lot of acronyms in this section. So FERPA. So Family Educational Rights Privacy Act. When your student is completing the common application, when they go into each individual school, so let's say they add a university, I'm in Madison, so let's say they're applying to Fairleigh Dickinson, right? And they fill out all the Fairleigh Dickinson specific questions that that school wants to know. And the next section down is the recommenders and FERPA section. And so the first time that your student goes to add their recommenders, so their teachers and their counselor and all these people who are going to say all these awesome things about them, the student's going to be prompted to answer the FERPA questions and waivers. So you can read through all of this, it'll walk you through it. But the short story is with under FERPA, all of the students' information, their academic information, their records, the letters of recommendation that are written about them, those belong to the student. So the student actually needs to give permission for their high school to send all of these records on their behalf. So the student has to check a box that they give permission. The second question that they have to answer is, do you waive or not waive your right to review your letters of recommendation? So this is usually where the conversation comes up. So when teachers and counselors and coaches and whoever are sending in these letters of recommendation, technically, because they're information written about the student has a right to read the letter and know what is being sent. We counsel our students typically to waive the right to see those letters because number one, on the front end, we've been really intentional and thoughtful about who we're asking to write this letter of recommendation for a student. We are very confident that the letter of recommendation is going to only say good things, right? We've really thought about that. Number two, on the back end, when the letter gets to the college and the person who's writing the letter of recommendation can see what box the student checked. If the student checks the box that says, I do not waive my right, then when the admissions office is reading that letter, they have to keep in mind that this letter may have been read by the student, may have been asked for edits by the student's parents. This teacher knew that the student and the parents were going to read it, so that may have impacted how honestly they were speaking about the student. And so maybe the student was amazing and the teacher's saying all these amazing, incredible things about what a fantastic community member the student is. But that gets a little bit undermined and clouded if the admissions officer is thinking, okay, but like, how accurate is this really? Like, was this written because they knew the parents were going to see it, or did the teacher really feel this way? So from our perspective, it's in the student's best interest typically to waive their right. Of course, if a student feels really strongly, this is their application, they can do what they want to do, but that is typically our advice, is to waive that right. So that's FERPA. Once your student gets into college and is attending school, there are other different FERPA protections that would go into place for them as a student on a college campus. And that's usually something that's talked about during orientation. So when you bring your student and you're moving them in and they have sessions for parents, you want to go to those because that's when they'll get into the details about what FERPA looks like on college campuses. But for application process, that's FERPA. Yeah, awesome. What about, so that's not to be confused with FAFSA.
Ooh.
FERPA, FAFSA. Yeah, do you want to talk about FAFSAs?
Sure. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, which is basically a form that families will complete utilizing their tax return information that lets colleges know how much need-based aid that family is eligible for.
Mhm.
This year, FAFSA is almost a four-letter word because FAFSA deadline has been pushed to December 1st because they are introducing the simplified FAFSA, which is going to be great. FAFSA gets a really kind of tough reputation for being a bear of an application to complete, and they took that to heart and simplified the process. There are fewer questions now. But because this is the first year that FAFSA is getting the simplified FAFSA is getting rolled out, it will be opening on December 1st. Previously, it has opened on October 1st, and my guess is hopefully next year we'll go back to that October 1st deadline. But for our seniors on the call, definitely something to be aware of. But yeah, that's how colleges determine what kind of need-based aid your family is eligible for.
Perfect. So then another thing for our North Carolina students, and other states may have something similar, but for our North Carolina students, there is a process where students need to verify that they are residents of the state of North Carolina so that they can be eligible to receive in-state tuition at our UNC public schools. And so that process is another acronym. Actually, there's two. So students need to complete the RDS for their RCN.
Yes.
Yeah. So RDS is the Residency Determination Service, and the RCN is the Residency Confirmation Number, right? Yeah.
I thought it was
RCN.
certification number.
Certification, Residency Certification Number. So RDS, RCN. It sounds complicated. It's really not. But when your student is doing their applications, if they're applying to any of the UNC public schools, there will be a question on those schools' applications that ask, are you a resident of the state of North Carolina? The student will say yes. Then some of them will ask them what county they live in. And then they'll ask them, have you completed the process for residency determination? The student will say yes when they've done it. And then a box will pop up for students to enter in their RCN, their number. So students just need to go, if you Google RDS, it's the second search that comes up on Google, but it's through the College Foundation of North Carolina. So CFNC, the College Foundation of North Carolina, the Residency Determination Service is connected with them. So if you go to the CFNC website, your student will be able to fill out the form. It's pretty brief. The student is just going to basically share how long they've been living in the US and then living at their current address. You'll need some social security numbers and things like that for proof of residency. And then it'll give you a 10-digit number. And then you will just copy and paste that number into your application. And then if you're admitted, then you'd receive in-state tuition. And little hint here for anybody with older students, if you are at a UNC system school, you need to renew your RCN every year that your student is enrolled in the UNC system schools. Because if you don't, then you will, on their second year, you could end up getting a bill for out-of-state tuition. I had that happen to one of my families. They were like, we had to do this.
No.
Yes, you have to do this. Yes, so that is the residency determination. So if you're living in a state outside of North Carolina, because we do have franchises up in Maine and California and Florida and New York. So just check to see if your state has something similar. So our last common acronym, it's all acronyms for these applications, have to do with the types of admission. So Jordan, you want to just give us a rundown of like those most common acronyms for admissions types?
I mean, ED, ED2, EA, SCEA, RD, all those
REA.
Yeah. So early decision, these are all different deadlines basically that a student can be working towards when they're submitting their application. So ED is early decision, which is that binding deadline. So when you're applying to a school ED, you're saying, if I'm admitted here, I'll withdraw my application from consideration at the other schools I've applied to, and I will attend this institution. So that is early decision, or ED. Typically, it's offered mostly by private institutions, but there are a couple of exceptions. ED2 is a second round of early decision deadlines. So ED or ED1 happens in the fall, typically November 1st-ish. ED2 is around for students who either didn't get into their first ED choice or didn't apply to an ED1 school. And that ED2 deadline typically happens around the first of the year in January. So again, same deal, binding deadline, you are committing to attend that institution. Where the confusion typically comes in is with early decision versus early action.
Mm-hmm.
So early action is another early deadline, again, typically November 1st-ish, mid-October to mid-November. But the early action deadlines are not binding. So you are simply just submitting your application earlier than regular decision in order to get your admission decision back sooner. RD is regular decision. So some schools will offer all of these different deadlines. Some of them will offer, pick and choose some of these, but the regular decision deadline, typically those are in January, and it is simply just the regular deadline. Typically it's the last deadline that you can apply to a college for.
Mm-hmm.
Rolling deadlines are going to be schools where you submit your application, it's reviewed as it comes in, and then you're given an admissions decision as soon as it's ready. Typically for ED, ED2, EA, and RD, colleges are holding on to all of the admissions decisions until they release them at one time. With rolling, applications are coming in and decisions are going out on a rolling basis. Single choice early action, I'll jump back, is for colleges, it's almost like a mix between ED and EA. Gina, you want to talk a little bit more about single choice early action?
So sometimes sometimes it's called single choice early action, or SCEA. Sometimes it's called restrictive early action, REA. Essentially, it's the same, but again, it's kind of like the SSAR and the SRAR. It's kind of the same concept. So what that means is, and so we see this opportunity, this admissions type at typically very highly selective schools that are not offering early decision. They're offering single choice or restrictive early action or regular decision. Those are your two options. If a student applies to a school under restrictive early action or single choice early action, they are not allowed to apply typically to another private institution under an early action plan or an early decision plan. Because if you apply early decision somewhere, you've already told that school you're coming. So you can't give yourself a good option somewhere else. You've already played that card, right? Early action, you're just kind of playing the field, right? You just want to see what's out there. But restrictive early action is saying you're going to apply to our private school early, but then you can't apply to any other private institution early action. You can only apply to the other private institutions regular decision. For public schools, you can so you couldn't apply early decision, but you just can't apply early decision to a public school, but you could apply early action to a public school and apply restrictive early action to a school that offers it. This is getting complicated, so I'm going to use some real life examples, and I'm not meaning to endorse or call out either of these institutions. That is my caveat. So Stanford University, California, offers a restrictive early action plan. So if I have a student who wants to apply to Stanford restrictive early action, then that student could not apply to Villanova University early action because Villanova is a private college. They would have to only apply to Villanova regular decision. That student could, however, apply to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill early action because UNC Chapel Hill is a public institution, so that would be allowed. There are not a lot of schools that do the REA or the SCEA. It's not super common, but like I said, you are more likely to see that at just a small number of very highly selective schools like Stanford that are going to offer that. So if you have a student who's looking at those schools and you see that plan, just make sure that you know what the rules are and how you're applying to the other schools so that you're not in breach of any of those plans.
It can feel a little bit like Tetris thinking about the different application deadlines.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So we have some questions that came in. So let me go back to those. Oh, and Andrea used to live very close to Madison, New Jersey. Oh, fabulous, Andrea. Great. Thanks for sharing that. So, okay, Tiffany's asking, is it okay for your child to write a school-specific short essay about something you listed on your activity list? Okay, so not specifically lingo related, but still a really good question. Yeah, school-specific short essay about something you listed on your activity list.
Definitely. I think, of course, you want to be providing more information than what you presented in your activity list. And depending on the prompt, you probably also want to tie that activity back into the institution. But absolutely, yeah, talk about it.
Yeah, just make sure that you're completely answering the prompt. Some schools,
Mhm.
too, you're going to see will have a section where they specifically want you to expand on an extracurricular activity that's
Mhm.
been meaningful to you. So that's definitely a go for it there, for sure.
Yeah.
And then Tiffany also was asking, when is FAFSA due? Great question. So, like Jordan was saying, the FAFSA will open December 1st. So, right now, you could go in and the parent and the student each can create their specific um, FSA IDs, which is the Federal Student Aid Identification. So FSA ID. So you can go to FAFSA and create FAFSA.gov and you can create your FSA ID for the parent and then the FSA for the student now. Just get that set up, have it ready to go. Once the FAFSA opens on December 1st, that's when you can go in, start putting in the information that they're asking for, the financial information. The deadline for when you need to submit that FAFSA is going to depend on the school you're applying to and the application plan that you are applying to at that school. So, schools who have earlier deadlines sometimes will want you to submit the FAFSA by January 15th, February 15th are usually the most common. For schools where students are applying regular decisions, sometimes they can go a little bit later, but I'd say generally January to February 15th. But you should look at each individual school your student is applying to and see if they have a separate deadline that they want that information by to be able to get you the financial aid package in a timely manner. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, great. And then some good questions about RCN from Andrea and Brian. So,
Mm.
um, yes. So Brian says, okay, so we need to get the RCN now before we apply to any UNC schools. And Andrea's like, when do we get this RCN? Yes. So both are things can be true. So if you can, I recommend all my students because I'm just trying to minimize the work that we need to do later once these applications are in. So with all of my students, and I think with Jordan, with all of her students, what we do with our students is we try to make sure that those applications are 100% full. Every single box has been checked and good when we send them. With the RCN, if a student has completed the RCN and has the number, they can put it in before they submit that Common App. So if you've got a student applying to UNC in October, Brian, then you could go ahead, you can get that RCN, put it in, boom. If you are applying to UNC in October and for some reason you don't have the RCN yet, you just haven't had a chance to sit down and do it, it's fine. You will still be able to submit the application by that October 15th deadline for UNC Chapel Hill, no problem. But then your student is going to have to go into their application portal after they apply, which is a whole separate process that I'll do another Facebook Live about. After your student applies, each individual school is going to send them a link for their own unique application portal that they need to manage. And if your student hasn't yet submitted their RCN, they will need to submit it into the portal. So if you don't have a chance to get it done, it's okay. But it's just one thing that you can have checked off your list early. And it doesn't take long. It's not a significant process. My only advice that I tell students and families is it's the student's application, but the student should sit down with a parent and do it. Because the majority of time that I have had a student do it on their own, they come back telling me that it says that they're not a resident of North Carolina and everybody's upset because for generations we have lived in North Carolina and my grandfather founded this farm and we've lived here and we've never lived anywhere else. Clearly we're residents. Something just got messed up. And now we have to call to appeal. And the people at CFNC, from my experience, are so lovely and nice and helpful. So if you have any questions, you should call them. They're great. But yeah, I would recommend having it done beforehand. Just saves you some time later. Yeah, good questions. think those were all of them. Awesome. So
Great.
while we're giving everyone a chance to throw in another question, if you have it, I wanted to let you know that I will be back on September 24th at 8 o'clock, and I'm going to be talking about AI, like ChatGPT, anyone, and college applications. So I know some of you with seniors might be feeling a little bit stressed. Your students might be feeling a little stressed about writing these essays and might be intrigued by how ChatGPT can help them. And so let's talk about it. Let's have an honest conversation about what to do and what not to do, and how can AI be helpful and hurtful when it comes to writing these application essays for colleges. So we'll be doing that on the 24th. If you found this helpful, definitely come back for that. You can also find all of the other Facebook Lives that we've done over the last year and a half are on our Facebook page. They are all saved for you, so you can watch those. We also have great resources for free on our website, advcp.com. We have a fabulous blog, podcast, videos. You can schedule a consultation there. Again, like I said earlier at the beginning, if you came in late, Jordan and my other colleague, Ariel, do great work working with our student athletes. So if you have a student who is planning to pursue athletics in college, that could be something that we might want to work together on. So you can definitely reach out and ask more questions about that. Okay, one more question from Preeti. When is the best time to do college visits? Great question. It depends on the year. What's your normal timing plan, Jordan? What are you telling your families?
Yeah, so I think doing official visits that are at colleges you're excited about, those kind of start in junior year, depending on kind of your family schedule, what you have going on. So sometimes students will start doing that in the fall, sometimes they'll wait until the spring. I try to let students know that in the spring, colleges host open houses specifically for juniors. So those can be great opportunities to get on campuses. Summer can be tricky for visiting. It's nice, of course, because you don't have school, but college students also aren't in school. So the vibe of campus can be very different. It can be almost like a ghost town if there aren't any students there. So I would say spring or fall of junior year, and then fall of senior year is also a great time to either revisit some schools that you're really considering, or to finish up some of those campus visits for schools that you've recently added to your list. And then if you are narrowing down your choices between a couple of schools, colleges will offer they call them yield events in the spring of senior year. So open houses specifically for admitted students, giving them as much information as possible so that they can make the most informed decision about what school they want to attend, or the school that they have already decided to attend.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much, Jordan. This was good. Hopefully
Right.
now you're empowered, right? You know the lingo. You're going to go to the campus. You're going to be throwing around these terms. You're going to go tell all your friends in North Carolina about completing their RCN. You're going to look like you know exactly what's going on. That's what we want for all of you. So again, definitely reach out through the website if you have any questions. We love to help. And I hope you'll have a great rest of your weekend and good start to next week. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.